good to be here today. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for your presentations. So I think both of you share an element of activism within your work. And when we met preparing for this session, we decided it would make sense to talk about how to work with hacking algorithms or protecting yourself from algorithms. And before going into that, I'm just going to read a bit of text for you from this publication that Lars also mentioned that I made with researcher Anne Kølbæk-Iversen. I'll read from the introduction, and it's on performativity in connection to algorithms and body politics. There are artist contributions in it by Lauren Lee McCarthy, Jana Sottola, and Anna Lund, Tabitha Reser, and Linda Hilfling Rittersdatter. And it was actually a performance art program that never happened, that became a publication instead. So it's all centered around all these artist contributions. But me and Anne, we write in our introduction to the publication. Because of the high impact from algorithms in our everyday life, discussions of the predictions and preemptions of algorithms enter center stage. In recent years, literature has appeared exposing algorithms as an opaque, decisive factor in our lives, often inherently biased. Services are molded to fit our as of yet unknown needs or correct for future possible actions. As media theoretician Wendy Chung underlines, you, in the face of big data algorithmic culture, are never singular. And then we quote Wendy Chung. Crucially, this body is never singular, but plural, and this plurality leads singular actions to probable actions, that is, collective habits. Within this mass of neighborhood actions, no one action goes uncorrelated. And on that note, I would like to open our panel with a question for you, Anna Lena, but I also want to say that you're welcome to ask questions, so raise your hand and I'll make sure that we hear your question. But starting off this panel, I would like you to talk about some of the tools you're working and developing within your work on hacking algorithms.
Yeah. So just a word about hacking. We talked about this previously. So there's the hacking, software hacking, being able to code like the Chaos Computer Club in Germany is doing. That's not what we're doing, but we're investigating algorithms. But I also think on a personal level, there's possibility to interrupt and confuse algorithms. So if you're not proficient with actual code and being able to hack systems, you can still experiment and see how the algorithm reacts. In our investigation called Datascope, we're looking at TikTok right now and the recommender system. And what we're using are data donations. So I've mentioned the right to request your data, your personal data from platforms, and we've asked people to donate that data. There's lots of stuff in there, you know, your phone number, where you live, your IP address, your bank details, so lots of personal info. And but what we process is more relevant stuff for us, like what kind of recommendations are you getting? So that's a way to investigate and challenge algorithms and to get a better understanding of how things are shown to you and why. So that's important. And what you can personally do also is just change your profile and become more invisible, delete your profile picture, change your gender, change your date of birth, give false information in order to confuse the algorithm. And you will most likely see different results in your feeds already after a couple of days. So there's small interventions that you can start yourself even if you're not a coder.
I was just reminded yesterday about the algorithm because I have artists visiting from Zimbabwe, and I met them first time in Zimbabwe 10 years ago. So they're producing a show at Kollega next week, it's opening, and they were logging on to Kollega's Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden their Instagram feed it was in Danish, and what they saw, the content was, the ads was very much Danish related, but also the the people they were following were maybe more people based in Europe. And then I was reminded how the algorithm has also changed in that regard, because I used to, when I met them like 10 years ago, their photos used to pop up in my feed, but they don't do it anymore unless I really go into their profile and like make sure to interact a lot, because it's more centered around my specific location here, and I see what my colleagues are doing in Copenhagen. Because as you also mentioned, we were discussing the notion of hacking, and I found something super interesting within your project, looking at the artist as activist at the same time, and using your organizational skills within your project Go's agency to potentially make some change in a specific region. So I wonder if you could say something about that.
Yes, I mean, I think, I think I don't consider the project as, I don't consider my own work as activism as such, but I think it's a question of language and literacies, and there's so many things at play, so I'm also just trying to figure out where to start. I think that yes, it's relevant that the project uses the term agency, and then as something that can be ghosted, and yes, that can be creating a space which might mobilize. That's what we are exploring or investigating, researching for. So I think that there, in terms of like hacking the system, again, it's not like, even though one of us is a programmer and we work with people who might have the ability to, or the skills to hack. This isn't. This is not at the front of what we're practicing. It is to. Actually, I think what we're practicing, we are also discovering ourselves, is that even though it's developing real technological tools that we speak of as dataless, which is really interesting. When does a tool become dataless? Mm-hmm. And whether it's an activism to do that or not, I'm not so interested in, because it's real still. So it's like, if it's real and therefore an activism, sure. But I think that so we are working with right now one cybersecurity expert, and we'll be engaging more programmers in this process of designing different ways to be dataless. That's as much as we can say right now, and hopefully we'll be able to share much more in a year. And that actually in the process, because considering who we are doing it for, are people who are in danger, are in a vulnerable position. They are not, as a starting point, Danish citizens living in Denmark. They are in Mexico. So there's very much that dimension of understanding people's lives. In my case, understanding it in an entirely different culture than I'm coming from. And learning in this process, which I think is really important, is that actually being able to design or test these technologies requires a lot of analog work in the first place. So there we go again. It's not only technologies that want to open up for datalessness to be reachable and achievable for more people, or in a way almost to democratize datalessness. It's also understanding how the body must be in that space in the first place in order for us to learn how to walk the design through, and it cannot be done by one individual, and it cannot be done by a system or like a network of skillful people, and then them developing a model which is then imposed by a group that is so vulnerable, and that actually counts for all of us. This is what hopefully we'll be learning from the process, that we will be able to say, okay, can this actually be expanded in one way or another? I hope that was an answer of sorts.
Yeah, I was also just, I wanted you to highlight some of the framework in terms of ghost agency and the setup.
What do you mean by the setup?
In terms of the funding and that whole structure around it.
Yeah. So we are in this pilot phase, and I think that was also, we spoke about it a little bit before the talk earlier, and like what might be a fact to bring to take away is that the funding comes from the Nordic countries and are sort of like bridged to a project that takes place in Mexico almost entirely, although of course the process feeds back to and through institutions such as ArtHub. There's also ITU Ethos Lab that we are in a partnership with, and other institutions here so far in Northern Europe. And what's interesting and like important to know about that is that we actually have institutions and philanthropy to some extent that allows for some kind of funding to set off a project such as this, which takes place entirely outside of the European zone. And so this is actually what's happening now with this project. And so there's like the acceptance that an artist can work process-based with no promise of an actual artistic thing. It has been accepted by the institutions that are taking in this project that we can be in this process, and that it's not even going on, it's not even unfolding on this ground. So I think it's quite amazing that we're at a place where this is actually possible. So I just wanna, that's something that it's a little bit of hope. But on the other hand, why are we in Mexico? We are also in a country where there is this extreme complexity, and where there's like a loss of hope also among many young women activists, to a point where it seems that they feel more inclined to practice activism through violent acts, rather than anything else, and that is because of a very high level of despair. And why is that? Because of course there is a neglect from the system. So that's So we are like facing that, and like just trying to open up for a different course, which must, I think, be process-based.
That leads me to a question regarding your presentation, Anna Lena, because you also talk about big global issues, and you mentioned some new cases within migration in Southern Europe, and how AI is violating human rights. And I was just wondering if you can give some examples of how that works and how human rights are being violated.
Yeah, so I can give one or two examples. We're just starting the project, and it's a colleague in Italy actually doing that, and he's more on location, and it's really, really good to have him there. because you can talk directly to people affected. But for example, 2 years ago in Greece, they started a program using drones and drone footage for border control. And drones not only do facial recognition, but they can capture movements. So, for example, that when that footage is fed into computers, it can analyze if a person is just walking or if a person is running, and that might give you the ability to conclude if it, is it a refugee because that person is running, or is it just someone crossing a border because that person is walking? So that's one very simple example of how technology is ramped up and how it might be used. Everything is being experimented with, so we're seeing a lot of changes in technology, and nothing that's, best case example, that horrible word to use. But that's why we're trying to look at it so concretely right now, because it's rapidly evolving with migration, and we think it's very, very important. And just picking up on what you said, Gro, of becoming data less, of having less of a trace, I think there are moments where we have the power. You can just log off. You don't have to use Instagram. You don't have to use TikTok. That's up to you. You might lose a bit of social connection, but you can still have less data traces. But when you're fleeing, when you're migrating from country to country, and there's a drone hovering above you, it's so hard to escape. And even if you pull up a hoodie and it doesn't recognize your face, it still might analyze your movements. So it's super hard to actually become traceless. And I think that's your project in that sense is really, really interesting to investigate that approach of becoming dataless.
And just thank you. And I'm actually concrete, just to let you know, some of the activities that we are working with now is over the summer in Mexico to do workshops with these individuals and groups on how to work, use on cybersecurity. Let's just put it like that. So that's also, it's understanding how do you actually start this process. And so it starts within the curiosity of wanting to know what is it, how do you do it, and what does it actually mean. And it bridges straight back to your work. And I think, I really want to know much more about this migration question. I just feel like now, since that I showed this short excerpt of the video, and in this time of AI, so what we learned about the intelligence of the program that we use to manipulate these video clips is that the AI isn't, first of all, very intelligent, but it's also it's not, it works really poorly with images that are dated, like older digital images that are often of lower quality or distorted quality. So when you type a prompt in order to manipulate the existing image or video clip into something else, it's sort of if it's a poor image quality, which dated archival material more often is, then it's really struggling with actually changing it or working with it. But if it's a really super high resolution 8K, 4K, then it's it allows for a lot of crazy change. So that was interesting in terms of how unregulated it is at the moment, but also in terms of its actual intelligence, and then all of the problems it has with bias and inability to redirect.
We have 2 questions, but I just had a comment on your work. Because I wonder, those images that you then fed to the AI, where do you have those from? Are they found images or
They're both found and recorded by us. Okay. And all relating to women's situation, more or less now in Mexico.
Public space.
And then yes, it's a lot of it is in public space. Yes, so we've been trying to, we've worked with the concept of hiding the identities of all the characters, and then working with what you can prompt, and then we've a way, instead of like, it's sort of like either accepting the flow of the bias and showcasing it, or trying to manipulate, like do something that is less expected. But while the project focuses on women or glitch bodies, there we found that it might be a way if we prompted all the characters to look or appear more over as women, even though they are originally not women in the original clips. So there's like different sort of like tweaks at play, while also a lot of it has been outside of our control. So it's a combination of that. Yeah.
We have 4 minutes for the 2 questions. We start here and then there.
Yeah, 2 questions I have for each one, but maybe first of all, it seems that some of the footage that you're using is before AI, definitely, because some is analog. It's like some 70s cars, and for me that was kind of interesting. Why would you choose to use so old footage? And the second thing that I noticed was that at some moments throughout this small clip, it seems that a traditional indigenous figure of a Mexican woman with a white skirt, so women from a specific peripheries of Mexico appear. So this was one. And the second question was for you, and I was wondering, would it be Giacomo, your collaborator in Italy?
Fabio.
No. Okay, so there's another Italian that is actually doing this specific research. We can talk about it later. It's something that we are very much looking into in relationship, because I'm in Greece and State of Concept that I'm running is in Athens. Just in case that people don't know, would like to kind of put out the information that it's Airbus that is actually producing these drones. Airbus is a state-owned company. It's owned by France, Spain, and Germany, with the Dutch, of course, doing all the, as they usually do, doing all the trading for the rest. So it's 51% state-owned, and basically Airbus is selling the drones to Frontex, and Frontex is basically selling it to the more, let's say, poor countries of the EU, Greece being one of them. So there's a second trade happening as well, which I think is extremely interesting to think about when we're thinking about these questions in relationship to surveillance technology and the fact that we are actually producing it within the European Union. And not a lot of people know that. That it's taxpayers' money that actually, add to this. So I just wanted to. It's an important information to know.
Thank you. Do you want to respond quickly? I guess mostly you probably.
I want to say, okay, the last question you asked first. So all colors exist in Mexico, but in the AI, not really. So when you prompt like Mexican woman on the street with a child and so on, it will come up with an indigenous appearing Mexican woman. In our case, we've been working with existing clips and then feeding them into the AI and then prompting on top of that. And we haven't necessarily wanted to change everything, but just hide the identity. And so it has been a balance. And sometimes, yes, there is a character that has been changed from a more indigenous appearing character to a more white. And also the same with gender identities. Your first question, sorry, was that related to the archival, like the intelligence of the internet, it's like we have history as well, and part of that history is found in images and the machine's ability to read them of them and going back. And also the storyline of the work is about women's condition in Mexico, and that it's something that just doesn't only exist in this current time. It also goes many decades back. So there's like the video is 18 minutes long. So there's like, there are more different archival footage alongside with new recordings.
Okay, we'll take the last question. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
This question is primarily for Anna Lena. So that algorithms and big data can be used for bad and is being used for bad, unfortunately. I think most people that participate today agree on. However, do you believe, or do AlgorithmWatch believe, that algorithms also can help challenge bias and actually be a driver for good? Google Maps green route option comes to mind. There could be others. Is that something that you also look into as part of your work?
Yes, most definitely. Thank you for that question. Really good one. Whenever I'm presenting, I draw up that doom scenario, and we are not in opposition to algorithms, not at all. So we don't blame tech. We want to see it well regulated and well used. I think that's the goal here. Concrete examples you've mentioned, the eco-routing by Google. I don't know if it's available here yet. You really have to differentiate between marketing and actual use and also oversight. So if Google is promoting that is actually a more sustainable routing, do they lay open the algorithm? Do they make it accessible to actually be evaluated? And so I'm always a bit skeptical. And to finish that question or final reply, we're publishing a report called Automated Society, and we're looking at examples all over Europe. And we've published it in 2020 for Europe, and then again for Switzerland only, because we've opened up a new branch. And there are also good examples of how to use algorithms, and also in public space, not only big tech and commercial applications, but also when it comes to healthcare and financial processing within countries. So yes, there are good examples, but we are a watchdog organization, so we're really trying to point our finger to where it doesn't work out.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, but thank you for your presentations. Yeah.